Hello, good morning, and welcome to Protecting Our Planet Day 2022. Actually, I say 2022, this is the very first Protecting Our Planet Day, so I'm going to hereby christen it Protecting Our Planet Day number 1, the inaugural one. Welcome wherever you are. My name is Dallas Campbell.
And I'm Susie Imbert, and here today we are at the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton, the home of Boaty McBoatface, and we'll find out much more about that later on.
A science legend, Boaty McBoatface. We've been struggling by saying oceanography today as well. We've been struggling with lots of big science words today. We've got a lot to cram in today. We're going to be taking you all over the world doing exciting things, but let's just have a little bit of a run through of what we are going to be looking forward to today.
The focus of our day today is climate change, so how we can monitor our planet and what we can do to help protect it. We have loads of different activities happening today, live across the world, including...
Well, we're going to be exploring different ecosystems, different parts of the climate system. So we're going to be looking at the realm of ice. We're going to be going to polar regions, glaciers, that kind of thing. We're going to be going to the oceans, exploring the oceans. We're going to be looking at forests, and we're also going to be looking at the Earth itself.
Yeah, travelling around the world, talking to scientists live from Antarctica, live from a ship in the middle of the ocean. So hopefully those links work and we'll be able to talk to our colleagues.
Basically, today is really, really complex in terms of logistics. We're here in Southampton, but we are going to be travelling all over the world. So we are going to be at the mercy of the internet and technology. But hopefully we're going to be taking you to some exciting places, including places like Egypt. We're going to go to Egypt today.
Shortly. So if you found this link, you can just stay on this link for the rest of the day. If you're a secondary school, if you're a primary school, there's a separate link. You will have found that when you registered on Eventbrite. So just hang with us today on this link and you'll see all of our content. After the end of the session today, we've got STEM Club as well. So don't forget, if you are taking part in STEM Club, you'll know who you are. Don't forget to get your activities ready. If you haven't got any activities yet, you can find lots of different examples of activities that you could do on the website.
Aren't we doing something on STEM Club?
We are also doing some surprise activities with STEM Club
The thing is, they're not going to tell us what our surprise activities are. And I think in the spirit of I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, they've got all kinds of like horrific things planned.
We'll find out
anyway,
later.
we're going to find out a little bit later on. Don't forget also, we want you to be involved. So send us your questions and then hopefully we'll be able to answer them. We'll be able to answer them, or the experts that we're going to be talking to will be able to answer them. And we can do that via Teams
type your question into the questions box via Teams. And that will come through to us and we can ask all the appropriate experts. Also, you can follow us on social media, hashtag POP22, POP22.
POP. There's a lot of
acronyms.
Acronyms today. I keep saying anacronyms, but it's acronyms. That's one of the words I'm struggling with today. So there's POP.
Protecting our planet.
There's NOC.
The National Oceanography Centre.
And there's COP.
And that's all about climate change, and we'll come to that shortly. In fact, we'll come to that right now.
Yeah, you will have heard, I'm sure, if you've been following the news, COP27. Last year, COP26 was in Glasgow, and it was an event where all the world leaders arrived to discuss the problems. Sorry, did I just hit you in the face with my clipboard? All around the world leaders are discussing the problems of climate change and how we're going to solve it. Now, this year, it's in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. Very nice, Sharm. Have you been to Sharm el-Sheikh?
No.
Very nice. And we're very lucky we've got someone at Sharm el-Sheikh who's going to explain a little bit more. Hopefully she's on the line now. Beaming live to Sharm el-Sheikh, Alyssa Gilbert. Is she here?
Yeah, here I am. Thanks for the intro.
Hi.
You're our first expert and the technology has worked. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, we're going to cut to the chase. Can you just tell us a little bit about what COP is, what you're doing there, and why it's important?
Okay, perfect. Well, let me start off by just reminding everybody a little bit about what climate change is. We use fossil fuels. We've been burning things like coal, natural gas for a long time, which has been great for our development as a world. But what we started to discover through science that was done around 200 years ago is that by burning those fossil fuels to get energy, we've actually been emitting a byproduct, which is a greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, and they have an impact on our atmosphere and they cause this heating effect. So warming the world. So an increase in average temperature. And what that actually means, although people measure this increase in average temperature around the world, actually it manifests itself. It sort of, you see it very differently in different parts of the world. So some places might become much, much hotter than the increased average temperature. Other places might see change in weather or rainfall patterns. And those can really impact people. It can impact us because it can impact agriculture and the crops that we grow. But it can also impact people by causing flooding. We've seen that happen in some parts of the UK and around the world. That can affect where people live. And it can cause extreme heat effects. We've had a lot of extreme heat activity in the UK, but that can lead to increased wildfires in places like Canada, Australia, and some very much more sort of extreme feeling storms in other parts of the world. And we've seen really enormous impacts, heat events in places like India, terrible flooding in Pakistan, really affecting millions and millions of people. So that's why it's a really, really important issue. So what can we do about it? Well, as I said, the root cause of this problem is our continuing increase emissions of greenhouse gases, which is caused by our use predominantly of fossil fuels. So what we can do is get together internationally and agree that we're going to reduce our use of fossil fuels and replace that with things like clean renewables, or even just becoming more efficient in the energy that we use. We also have to discuss with other nations around the world what we do to manage the impacts that we're seeing of climate change. I mentioned storm events, floods, extreme heat. That affects people all around the world, but it affects most people in very vulnerable parts of the world, or people who are vulnerable themselves. So the poorest people who aren't able to cope with those impacts. So what are we doing here in Sharm el Sheikh? I'm actually by a store cupboard, as you can see. It's very hard to get good internet connection here. Yeah, exactly. It's not as glamorous as you think.
We thought Sharm el Sheikh, you'd be by the pool sipping cocktails.
Absolutely not. So governments are coming together, trying to agree a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions whilst allowing people to get the things that they need most, right? We use fossil fuels for a lot of different things. So trying to figure out how we can reduce those greenhouse gas emissions together, because this is a global issue, because our atmosphere, the air, is shared. So we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions everywhere in the world, because it's a global sort of common good. We all share the air. But we're also having some important discussions here about other issues. So I mentioned, how can we manage to what we call adapt, deal with these impacts that we've already been seeing of climate change and expect to see more of? And also, how can we pay for some of these changes? So there's a big debate here in Sharm el Sheikh about how we can help provide what's called climate finance. And that means some of the wealthier countries in the world agreeing to give some money to the more vulnerable poor countries so that they can also rapidly reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and also put things in place to help them manage those impacts. It's really exciting being here. The kind of people that are around me, walking in and out of this cupboard and walking down the hallway in front of me, are people who are representing their countries in these negotiations, but also people from all kinds of other organizations who want to help make a difference. They might be representing different kinds of renewable power. They might be representing people who protect natural ecosystems and thinking about ways we can manage ecosystems better in the light of climate change. And I've also been meeting this morning with youth delegations, lots of young people here sharing their experiences from their own countries and explaining what it means to them to see climate change happening and what they want to do to try and solve it.
That's great. I've got a question. I mean, one thing you mentioned just there, you said we share a common atmosphere, we share a common planet, and that seems really obvious. It seems like the sticking point very much is to do with the politics. The fact that people are involved having to make decisions makes things really difficult. And I just wonder where you are in Sharm, do you get a sense of progress being made, or is there still a lot of heads being bashed together and not really being able to cut through the politics and the difficult human stuff?
Yeah, it is an intensely political issue. You're right. But I think things here happen in lots of different levels, which also makes it exciting and makes you able to feel a bit more positive. Because at the very highest political level, the speeches that were given earlier in the week, governments have to really stick to their script, right? There's a political context. There's a way that they engage with different countries. So they have to stick to that script. You hear them talking about the things that they are focused on, national priorities, and they don't touch upon the things that are difficult. But then when you hear other people engaging in the corridors here, you see lots of people who represent sub-regions of their countries or work for companies, they work for local government, they work for community organizations. And those people reach across borders too. And there you see a much more can-do attitude and people kind of finding solutions to those political issues in really practical ways. You also see evidence that even despite the political rhetoric. For example, some countries don't like to talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions right now because those countries actually didn't contribute in the past to those emissions. But you see those countries also talking about implementing renewable energy in their country off the stage because actually it's the most cost-effective and sensible thing to do in their situation.
I was talking to, actually, it was my daughter mentioned this the other day, and she's been following the Just Stop Oil protests that are happening. And she was asking me, I think, a really interesting question, which is, why can't we just turn off the taps of oil straight away and just say, right, we're going to just stop right now? Why can't we do that? Is there not a... Is it too difficult just to do that and to say, right, we're going to just stop oil today? What would happen?
Unfortunately, it is too difficult because we're all quite dependent on oil. We use it, I mean, most tangibly, we use it in our transport systems all around the world, people in cars, but particularly the vehicles that we're not driving or being driven in, the ones that bring us stuff. Shipping, we don't really think about a lot, but pretty big user of oil. They bring us food to eat and goods to buy, and also those heavy goods vehicles that are moving up and down roads all around the world. So we can't switch it off straight away, and that's what makes these 10 or 15 years really interesting and difficult, because we're seeing what we call a transition, a move from what we use today in industry, in transport, in energy and agriculture to something different, which is possible. But the infrastructure isn't quite in place yet, and we're not ready yet completely as consumers to use all those different things. So we've got to start using what we can and encourage the people who build and make infrastructure to start putting those things in place as quickly as possible, and then we can turn off the tap.
So it's a critical time right now. We look forward to finding out how things are going to unravel over the next few years. And remember, of course, that all of us can make a difference too in our everyday lives, as well as encouraging big companies to do their bit as well. Thank you, Alyssa, so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, live from Sharm el-Sheikh. We're going to move on slightly now, aren't we, to talk a little bit about the 4 ecosystems that we're going to cover today.
Yeah, well, we mentioned we're going to be taking you all around the world, and hopefully we will not disappoint. All of these ecosystems that Alyssa was talking about are really fundamental in regulating our climate and for us to understand how our climate works. So we're going to be looking at the realm of ice. So that's things like the polar regions, things like glaciers, and things like that. We're also going to be looking at oceans, which is very appropriate for where we are. You'll see all these little autonomous submarines that can dive into the oceans and swim about and do all kinds of exciting science. Where else are we going to be looking?
We're going to be looking at forests and the role
Yes.
of forests in protecting us against climate change, and also peatlands and the earth as well. But before we delve into each of these in turn, we've got a bit of a summary here from our friends at Autumnwatch. So let's have a look at what they had to say.
Hello, Chris here from Autumnwatch. We've just finished our run, broadcasting live, enjoying all of the rich biodiversity that we have here in the UK, and that is now available on iPlayer for you to watch. Now, I don't need to tell you that the world is facing a few problems when it comes to its richness of life and its climate, and it's essential that we do everything we can to protect our forest, our ocean, our icy deserts, our sandy deserts, all of our habitats. And that's what you're going to be learning about today on our Protecting Our Planet Day.
The frozen corners of our planet, from the icy regions of the Arctic and Antarctic to the snowy peaks and glaciers of mountain ranges like the Himalayas, are at the forefront when it comes to climate change. All that bright white snow and ice reflects a lot of the sun's energy away from the planet, so it acts as a sort of natural cooling system. But as our Earth is warming up, lots of that snow and ice is melting and retreating. The sea ice around the Arctic has shrunk by over 2 million square kilometres since the 1980s. And that means that there's less snow and ice and less surface area to reflect the sun's energy away. So it's really important that we protect our icy regions so we keep that natural cooling system. And one of the ways that we can do that is to reduce our emissions.
The oceans are one of our biggest global climate allies. That's because they soak up some of the carbon dioxide that gets released into the atmosphere from burning all the coal, oil and gas. Just like a sponge, as more and more carbon dioxide gets released into the atmosphere, the oceans soak up more and more of that carbon dioxide. But as our planet warms up, so do the oceans, making them less able to soak up that excess carbon dioxide. So, by limiting future emissions and warming, and by protecting the huge diversity of animals and plants that live in the ocean, we can keep that big climate ally fighting on our side.
The forests are another huge ally in tackling climate change. Growing trees take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and lock it away in their trunks, roots and in the soils beneath, sometimes for several centuries. Planting new woodlands and managing the existing ones can take so much carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that it will limit future climate change. Managing existing woodlands properly is also fantastic for our wildlife.
The soils beneath our feet are the largest store of carbon on the planet, and any change to the amount of carbon that they can hold will have a big impact on our climate. Here in the UK, some of the richest carbon soils are peatlands. And so if we can protect and restore peatlands, then we can reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, as well as boost wildlife and improve water quality as well.
Climate change is creating a real challenge for these habitats, but nevertheless, we have a raft of experts that you're going to be hearing from today who've come up with some very real solutions, things that will work if we roll them out broadly enough and rapidly enough. And we want to ensure that we leave you with a real sense of hope that we can restore and repair our precious planet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to our friends at Autumnwatch. You may be noticing that we are wearing our green Blue Peter badges here. So to find out how you could get a Blue Peter badge, let's talk to our friends at Blue Peter.
Hello, my name's Richie and I'm here to tell you all about our very special green badge. Last year, Blue Peter asked everyone to be climate heroes and apply for a green badge by making positive changes to live in a more environmentally friendly way. Thanks to your amazing efforts, we saved 230,000 kilograms of carbon from entering the atmosphere, which could be the equivalent of planting 10,000 trees. Our green badges recognise the amazing things kids like you do for nature and the environment to protect our planet. You might already do something to protect our planet, like walking to school or growing bee-friendly flowers, and today you might learn about something new you can do. If you want to get involved, head to the Blue Peter website to tell us all about it and apply for your Blue Peter green badge.